Okay, sounds like audio is working. Hopefully video is working and hopefully the presentation is working here. So we're going to start over. This is a recorded podcast, or not a podcast, recorded webinar. And so feel free to send your questions via chat and I'll try to answer those at the end of the webinar. But my name is Alex. I'm the president here at Premier Credit Consulting. And today we're talking about the dispute process. One of the reasons why we wanted to do a webinar on this topic is because there's a lot of misinformation about the dispute process. And we wanted to try to break down how it works and how it impacts your clients and ways that your clients can be successful, whether working with a credit repair company or doing it on their own, so that they can avoid the pitfalls that make the dispute process so frustrating. So we're going to jump into this here. Today's agenda, we're going to talk about the Fair Credit Reporting Act. We will get into the details of the dispute process. And then we're also going to talk about tracking results, because this is one thing that's come up recently that has been a really big problem for consumers. So let's talk about the Fair Credit Reporting Act. I'm sure everybody has heard of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. It was introduced in 1970 to create privacy protection for consumers, while also promoting fairness and accuracy on the information listed with the credit reporting agencies. We're going to be doing a webinar next month about the credit bureaus and a lot of the abuses that were associated with the credit bureaus. But one of the main reasons why the Fair Credit Reporting Act is so important is because before 1970, consumers had credit profiles that were littered with biases and misinformation, and oftentimes consumers didn't have access to that credit report or have access to try to fix it. And so because of the way that the system is set up, where the burden of proof is on the consumer and not on the creditor for the validity of the information on a credit report, there needed to be some type of way for a consumer to be able to challenge or validate information on their credit report, and therefore the dispute process was created. And so per the Fair Credit Reporting Act, if there's any information on your credit report that may be inaccurate, unverifiable, misleading, or outdated, that information has to be removed from your credit profile. And in addition to that, not only does it have to be removed, but your credit report needs to be 100% fair and accurate. So let's break down these common Fair Credit Reporting Act violations. Inaccurate accounts. This happens fairly often when clients are struggling with credit challenges. So when you see collections or charge-offs on credit, there's a high likelihood that there's inaccurate information reporting. So any accounts that are reporting with incorrect balances, incorrect dates, incorrect verbiage, these are the types of accounts that have a high likelihood of being removed during the dispute process because of those types of reporting errors that are making them inaccurate. Now, unverifiable debts. Examples of these are medical collections. That's probably the best example that we have because oftentimes with medical collections, there are coding issues associated with that debt, or the debt was paid by insurance, but it's a duplicate reporting on credit. And so unverifiable accounts where you seek verification of the debt and the creditor cannot provide that verification is a Fair Credit Reporting Act, and those accounts have to be removed from credit. Now, misleading accounts, these are ones that are a little bit more tricky. You don't see a lot of them, but what we oftentimes find with misleading accounts is that you will see an open account reported as a charge-off, even though the client has an open line of credit with that creditor. So if the account is reporting under the wrong category, this is what we would consider a misleading account. And oftentimes that is an account that needs to be fixed, not removed from the credit report. And then outdated accounts, really, this is one where a lot of people hype up, the statute of limitations, but there's so much confusion about the statute of limitations that just simply removing accounts because they're too old doesn't happen all that often. And so what you have to look at when it comes to outdated accounts is not the date that the account was opened. What we're looking at here is what is the date of last activity. So on a collection, for example, if you have a medical collection for $50 and that collection was opened in 2010, it is not outside of the statute of limitations. If the date of last activity is older than 7 years, then at that point, it would be registered as an outdated collection and need to be removed from the credit report. So just to clarify on this one more time, when you're looking at accounts and trying to identify whether a collection is outdated, right? It's not based upon the date that it was opened. It's based upon the date of last activity. Now, there is a question about statute of limitations on charge-offs. This one is a little bit more challenging, and this is a great question to answer at this time. The statute of limitations when it comes to a charge-off is based upon the date of first delinquency, not the date of last activity. So this is one area where it creates a lot of confusion for clients, because you'll see a charge-off on credit for longer than it's supposed to be, simply because the date of last activity has been updated, but the statute of limitation is based upon the date of first delinquency. So really wonderful question on that one, Ben. So essentially, these are common Fair Credit Reporting Act violations. Mostly what you see are inaccurate, unverifiable, misleading, or outdated accounts. And these are the types of accounts that are most commonly disputed with the credit bureaus. So let's talk a little bit about the dispute process and how it works. So if you are in a position where you're trying to dispute an account on your credit profile, most of the time consumers will do it online. Now, disputing online has its own set of issues, simply because the system that is used to process the dispute is oftentimes pretty inaccurate. So we always recommend, if you're going to dispute an account, to do it in writing with a letter and sending that information directly to the credit bureaus. So let's say, for example, you're disputing a medical collection. You sit down, you pour your heart out into this letter, maybe prick your finger, put a little bit of blood on it, spray some cologne, whatever it takes to create an emotional connection for whoever's reading that letter to understand the challenge that this has created for you. And you send that letter off to the credit bureaus, and you include a copy of your driver's license, you include a copy of your social security card, and a proof of address. You send that off, and you hope that somebody at the other end is going to open that and say, you know what, gosh dang it, I'm going to get this resolved for this guy, because obviously this is a problem. Unfortunately, that's not how the system works. When you send that letter to the credit bureaus, what happens is that that letter is received and then it's scanned. And when it's scanned, it's broken down into one of 29 different dispute codes. And the system that is used to break down that dispute is a system that we call eOscar. Now, eOscar is a data communication system that the credit bureaus use to process consumer complaints and to use the eOscar system for communicating during the dispute process. Now, the majority of disputes are going to be processed into 4 codes. Not all of the dispute codes are used all that often. So what happens is the credit bureaus will process that investigation with the data furnisher, and that data furnisher or collection agency or creditor has 30 days to respond to that request via eOscar. Now, when that request is sent to the creditor or to the data furnisher, there's no alarms going off in the office building. There's not people running around trying to figure out what happened in this unique situation. Essentially, that creditor has 30 days to respond. And then in addition to that, they just have to respond to that specific dispute code. So an example of that would be if you disputed an account saying that it was outdated. That data furnisher is essentially going to respond back yes or no to that request. And what oftentimes happens is that the data furnisher sometimes won't provide the correct information, requiring you to go through this process again. Now, once they respond, and the credit bureaus have the result of that dispute, the credit bureaus have 5 days to respond to you in writing, and they're going to send you a credit report in the mail. It comes in a blank white envelope. And when you get that credit report, it's like reading a different language. It's a very difficult credit report to read. But essentially what you're looking for is what is the result of the investigation from those credit bureaus. Now, this process takes a little bit of time. And like I mentioned earlier, you need to go through this process a few different times if you're trying to get accurate results. This is why disputing is so difficult for consumers, because it takes time and it takes persistence. Sometimes if that first result doesn't work, you have to go through it again to try to get it resolved. But what we really want to promote here is that if you correctly outline your reason for disputing an account, it's going to increase the likelihood that that account actually gets resolved in the dispute process. So if you're trying to do this on your own, or if you have a client that's trying to do this on their own, remember to give them the advice that the more accurate they can be with why they're disputing that account, and whatever supporting documentation they have to provide to prove their claim will only increase the likelihood that that dispute gets processed correctly. So this is one area where a lot of people get mixed up with disputing. One thing that I hear all the time is that if the creditor doesn't respond within 30 days, it has to be removed and it will never come back. A lot of companies have frivolous disputing tactics designed to make sure that the creditor doesn't respond to that dispute. I will tell you that the likelihood of that collection or negative item coming back onto credit due to frivolous disputing tactics is pretty high. So frivolously disputing or trying to trick the credit bureaus doesn't work, and the likelihood that that account comes back is pretty high. So that's why it's really important to responsibly dispute and to accurately define what the dispute code or what the dispute reason is so that it can be coded properly and thoroughly investigated. So let's move on to what happens if the creditor doesn't respond to a dispute. So this unfortunately has been happening quite often. The credit bureaus are not responding as frequently as they should when consumers are processing disputes. In fact, consumers are starting to register complaints with the CFPB because they're disputing accounts with the credit bureaus and they're not getting responses. And so they would go to the CFPB would register a complaint with the credit bureaus, and even the CFPB isn't getting responses. On January 5th, there was a report by the CFPB that outlined their report analytics that less than 2% of consumer complaints registered with the CFPB were responded to in 2021. That is a record low. That number in 2019 was 25%. And so the credit bureaus are not responding as frequently as they should to disputing. And we want to talk about how you can register results faster so that you're not sitting by your mailbox waiting for the credit bureaus to respond. So one thing that we recommend and that we do here at Premier Credit Consulting is we offer credit monitoring to our clients. All of our clients have access to credit monitoring built into our service. And so instead of waiting for the dispute results from the credit bureaus, we're able to update results from our disputes by updating a consumer credit report every 30 days. Now, if you have a client that is disputing information on their own, I highly recommend that they sign up for some type of credit monitoring so that they can track the results via their consumer report versus waiting for the results to be sent to them. Now, sometimes they will get results in the mail. Once they get that, they need to thoroughly read through the credit report and check to see what the results are. And then if they don't get anything and they don't have credit monitoring, they do have the right to reinvestigate the account by sending a request to the credit bureaus requesting the results of the investigation. These situations are rare, but you can send that written request to the credit bureaus to populate a result from a previous dispute. So we kind of outlined this from the best way to track results when you're disputing an account to the most difficult way. I would definitely recommend that if you have clients who are trying to dispute accounts, that they sign up for some type of credit monitoring so that they can check their credit report and not have to wait for the written responses. So why does the dispute process take so long? Now, this is probably one of the most frustrating parts for any client, whether they're working with a company or doing it on their own. When it comes to disputing, it takes time and it takes perseverance. And so I wanted to give you some insight into how we dispute so that we can get the maximum results in the lowest amount of time. So the dispute process usually takes between 30 to 45 days to register results. Now, if a client comes to us and they have a large number of accounts, let's say for an example, a client comes to us and they have 20 accounts or 30 accounts that have to be disputed with the credit bureaus. We're not allowed to dispute all of that information at once with each bureau. So what we do is we break it down into batches where we try to dispute as many accounts as we can with each credit bureau in one round of disputes. This is different than a lot of other credit repair companies who will only dispute with one credit bureau at a time and they limit how many accounts can be disputed per round. So our company is able to do within 30 to 45 days, while other companies usually take 4 to 6 months to get done for their clients. But if you have a client who has a lot of accounts, 15, 20, 30 accounts that they're disputing, they shouldn't dispute all of them at once. You can dispute between 8 to 10 accounts at a time, and we recommend that you break those up into what we call batches so that those can be adequately investigated by the credit bureaus instead of being flagged as frivolous disputes. So that's sometimes why this time frame can be a little bit longer, is because you have to break up the process of disputing accounts depending on how many accounts a client has. So when it comes to results and partner updates, one of the things that we really want to promote here is that transparency is key when you have clients going through the dispute process. So for example, as your client is going through the dispute process, we provide real-time email updates. These updates are going to show you where the client is at in the program based upon their stage, and it's also going to give you the results of the disputes or validation efforts or negotiation efforts that we have going on here at Premier Credit. In addition to that, we provide monthly pipeline reports, and then we also have an internal partner care team that proactively reaches out to you to give you updates on where your clients are at in the process. So one thing that we rolled out this year is a new toolkit resource where we are providing resources to you that you can send to your clients when they have questions about the dispute process, or about why they have so many credit scores, or why they shouldn't close that credit card when they pay it off. So these are resources that we'll be sending out to you that will hopefully help you answer client questions when they come up in regards to credit. Now, today we covered a lot of information about the dispute process. And one of the things that we hope really helps you is that when your clients run into a situation when they have credit challenges, that it's in their best interest to take action. The burden of proof is on the consumer, not on the data furnisher, when it comes to inaccurate, unverifiable, misleading, or outdated information on credit. So if they can take action, uphold their rights per the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and be able to dispute an account to register results so that they can fix that item, it's in their best interest, because ultimately it's not only going to help them improve their credit score, but it's going to help them improve or really maximize their purchasing power. So we hope that this information was valuable for you today. We try to keep these things as concise and short as possible. So we're going to wrap up with that. Thank you so much for participating. For those of you who are still on the call or on the webinar, if you have questions, I would love to answer those for you. But we appreciate you taking time out of your day, and we hope that this was a valuable